Hey, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the show where we watch every episode of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, in sequential order, and we comment on it Mystery Science Theater style. This week, we are watching an episode that is pretty crazy. It's got a whole lot of wackiness to it, and so I'm very happy to have with me one man that can help make sense of this time travel monstrosity. The one, the only, known on the internet as Hooded Cobra Commander, Brian Lauer. Brian, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Yo, Joe. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you on, my friend. We are watching G.I. Joe and the Golden Fleece today. Are you familiar with this episode?
I actually don't remember the episode from when it originally aired, so I did refresh my memory by rewatching it, and wow, it is interesting. I'm familiar with it now.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but we're going to start with you, Hooded Cobra Commander. You can find Hooded Cobra Commander on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel called, of course, of all things, Hooded Cobra Commander 788. And Brian, tell us what you do on that YouTube channel.
On that channel, I do reviews of vintage G.I. Joe figures and vehicles, basically the original vintage run from 1982 to 1994. And we kind of have some fun with it. We do reviews, they're toy reviews, but we also do funny skits, and we have guest appearances and crossovers and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So, you know, every video we kind of try to make it a production and have a lot of fun with it and do a little bit more than just looking at the toys.
That's really cool. It's very inventive. How long have you been doing it?
About just a little over 3 years now. It started as a very humble channel with a pretty crappy video to start out with, but we've improved, I think, hopefully.
Well, it's great, man. Well, everything's got to start somewhere, and I love that you've stuck with it over 3 years. About how many videos have you put up? Like, how frequently do you post?
I post a review once a week, but every once in a while, in the middle of the week, I'll throw up a short video, just a little quick look at something, or just some commentary or something like that. But I have a pretty regular schedule that I stick with. I try to get a new full review up once a week, usually on Sunday afternoons.
That's really great, man. That's really great. So that kind of dedication, that belies a real love for G.I. Joe. How long have you been a fan?
I have been a fan since I first discovered G.I. Joe in 1982.
So you were done like a day oneer.
Yes, I remember. Okay, I don't remember everything about that era perfectly, but there are some memories that stick out, and one strong memory is seeing the TV commercial where Breaker is riding on the Ram motorcycle, and that just looked too cool. And my first action figure, my first G.I. Joe action figure was that straight arm Breaker. I had to get that one first. And looking back at it, it's one of the duller figures from that first run, but it was my first, and I was hooked since then.
He had a headpiece that was not dull. The headpiece was exciting, and it connected to the backpack. That is not dull.
Okay, all right.
That was actually awesome. Hawk,
no
very
actual
dull.
Like weapons to shoot
Correct.
anybody with. Which is why, though, he needed to be paired with that Ram motorcycle. That's my favorite pairing. Breaker with the Ram motorcycle.
That's great. So would you say he's your favorite Joe?
My favorite Joe is Stalker. Of course, I picked up Stalker later. It wasn't my first, but the character of Stalker as portrayed in the comic book really appealed to me. The action figure itself with the camouflage, that just seemed special.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Stalker was and still is my favorite.
It is weird when you think about it. The early figures, while everyone was in green, there was only one dude in camo green.
Mm-hmm.
And like camo is pretty prevalent on most. You think military, you think camo, and yet only one figure was smart enough to be like, I'm gonna hide.
Yeah, yeah. I know those paint applications on the early figures were expensive to produce, but they cut a little bit of cost by making one figure, Snake Eyes, with no paint applications at all. And that just gave them the room and the budget to give Stalker a little extra paint and a little extra color, which turned out really cool.
That's some really great insight. So tell me about that. It sounds like you've researched the actual origins of it.
Well, I try to, and I'm not perfect. I do the best I can in every review.
You have nothing to apologize for. This show does zero research. I watch a cartoon and we reminisce. I do no research, so you just drop more knowledge on the making of the toys than we have in almost any episode of this show. So I love it. So continue.
I appreciate it. I try to find out as much as I can about each figure before I get started with the review. Some information, some are a little spottier than others, but there are some figures and vehicles where we have there are interviews with the designers. We have some pre-production artwork that can be found. So I try my best to find that stuff before I get started and to give some background to each thing that I'm reviewing. Try to put it in context with the whole toy line, try to put it in the context of how it was used in media and a cartoon and a comic book, but also, what were the influences behind it? If it came with a gun that was inspired by something in the real world, then we look at that. I mean, okay, this is what this is based on, and this is where that came from. My reviews can tend to be a little research heavy.
So that's amazing. I love that. That's that's a huge reason why people listen to podcasts and watch YouTube videos and stuff, to learn like that. That's fantastic. Should be commended for that. That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm doing my best. Now, I don't usually have to worry about missing anything or getting anything wrong, because I'm always guaranteed within about 30 seconds someone will comment and correct me. So that's just how it works on YouTube. The viewers miss nothing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then they'll also call you a name. So I mean, that's also how it works on YouTube. So,
standard operating procedure on YouTube.
Some kind of racial slur or something.
No, I don't, but I have some great viewers. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, I love it.
There are always a few bad apples, but by and large, my viewers have been fantastic and so supportive.
Awesome. And you're calling in today from Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Where you are you're a lawyer. You're a civil defender?
Another lawyer you've had on your show, but
yeah, I want to pad my legal team, the Joe and Joe legal team, with as many lawyers as possible. I think that's a smart move.
I think what I think is ironic is that Larry Hama didn't seem to have much love for lawyers in the comic book, and yet somehow a bunch of Joe fans went into the legal profession. I'm not sure exactly how that worked.
My friend Tom Simpson, shout out to Tom if you're listening, back home, he was a big Joe fan growing up, and he went on, and he's a DA back in Chicago or something along those lines. Yeah.
Well, I'm on the opposite side. I'm on the public defender's side, but I don't do criminal defense, which is what people usually think of when they think of public defenders. What I do is on the civil side. I actually represent anyone in our county who has had someone petition the court to have them committed to a hospital involuntarily for mental health.
Wow.
People who are having mental health issues and to meet the legal criteria to, be in a hospital, sometimes if they don't want to. Well, all of those people get a right to an attorney, and I represent them. And that's what I do day in and day out. I meet people who have pretty severe mental illnesses, and I try to defend their interests, protect their interests, protect their legal rights through a process when someone, either a family member or a doctor, thinks they need to be in a hospital.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. It's an aspect of the law I don't think I've really ever put much thought into.
It's a very specialized niche, and I fell into this after law school just kind of by chance, but it is an incredibly rewarding area of the law in which to practice, because I see clients get better fast. I mean, they go to the hospital, they get on their medication, and a lot of times it's like night and day. And it's really rewarding to see positive change in people's lives very quickly.
That's really fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I feel like that's it's a piece of the puzzle of society that I know I've never put a lot of thought into, and we need someone to do it. So thank you.
I'm thrilled to do it, and it's one of those things that is kind of invisible to most people, because the cases that we do, they are all confidential. I mean, I can talk to you kind of generally about what we do, but I can't share any anecdotes of any kind, because all of those cases have multiple layers of confidentiality on them. So you can't just go down to the courthouse and go into a courtroom and see one of these cases, see a hearing for one of these cases.
Right.
So unless you are a family member of someone who goes through one of these cases, or if you had one of these cases filed on you yourself, you don't see it. Most judges don't see it. Most other attorneys have never experienced this. So it's very specialized, but we see a lot of big changes in people's lives. But at the same time, we want to make sure everyone's rights are protected. I mean, we're talking about people who are being committed to a hospital sometimes when they don't want to go. Well, those people have rights, and we got to make sure those rights are defended. And that's what I get to do every day.
That's awesome. That's great. Awesome. We're done here. That's it.
All right.
That's enough. That's good
All
enough.
Right. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, you do more comprehensive videos than I do, and you're a better man than I am. We're out.
No.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. That's fantastic, man. That's really cool. Do you feel like your passion for G.I. Joe or any of the not to lead you, counselor, but do you find that there was any influence that G.I. Joe had in your choice of field or?
Not directly, but kind of indirectly. Back when I was a kid, reading the comic book had all these Easter eggs about philosophy and history and some aspects of law, concepts of rights and things like that. All those things were kind of sprinkled in there. And I was one of those kids that read that and wanted to learn more about it. So it did kind of inspire me to be more inquisitive. And that is an attitude that stuck with me and has always stuck with me. It didn't necessarily directly lead to the law. Actually, I was more on a track of being like a history major. But I switched to political science and then law because I wanted to do something that I felt was more, actively engaged in society right now. I remember from a very early age and reading specifically G.I. Joe comic books being intrigued by the kind of these little windows on the real world that it would provide in the pages of the comic book.
I think it's funny that you absolutely nailed it on the head when you said Hama would always take swipes at lawyers. Like lawyers always got it.
Oh my gosh!
They always got the short end of the stick on that in that comic book. Always, yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, Crimson Guardsmen. Look at their file cards. They're some of the basest and most vile members of society, like accountants and lawyers. There's later in the comic book run when they were covering the Eco Warriors. It's like a 3-page story that had the Eco Warriors. They at the very end of that, they brought in a secret weapon that was too horrible. The Joes thought might be just too horrible to level against Cobra. Not to spoil it too much, but that secret weapon was a lawyer who just delivered legal documents to Cesspool, the leader of the bad guys, and say, "Oh no, yep, defeated by a lawyer." The most horrible weapon that they could come up with.
Well, you said it, not me, but yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny. That's great. Well, listen, this week I like to think that we take your very serious, very real world job and profession and all the wonderful things you just described, and we chuck that out the window because the Joes travel through time.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're gonna watch G.I. Joe and the Golden Fleece, and it is a cartoon. It's well made.
Yes, absolutely.
I think there's fun character moments in it, but it is it's on the in my opinion, it's on the lower end of G.I. Joe cartoons.
Yeah, and I thought you might say that, so I've actually intentionally tried to think of some positive things to say about it, and I do have some. I have some.
So do I. I do. And we'll get into it. So, right. Remember, if you're out there, you want to check me out online, you can go to @JoeandJoePod. That's on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Or send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com, and you too can be a guest, just like our friend Brian Lauer here. And make sure to check out Hooded Cobra Commander's videos on YouTube. All right, Brian, are you ready to watch this show?
I'm ready.
All right, man. So we're going to do it. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, with G.I. Joe and the Golden Fleece.
Yo, Joe!
All right. So what was your... So you said you had a lot of the early guys. How long did you collect the figures till?
I collected through 1988, or at least part of 1988. I was kind of turned off by the 1987 animated movie when I saw it, and that was kind of my exit. But I didn't apparently see the movie in 87. Apparently I saw it at some point in 88 because I remember getting some of the 88 figures.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1989, just for kicks, I got the second version of Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
More for nostalgia than anything else, but that was
a sweet hat.
Figure. Yeah, that was the only figure from '89 that I got, and that was actually my last figure as a kid.
Oh, cool! Yeah, my last figure was Snake Eyes version 3.
That's not a bad one.
Yeah. I did. I remember when I got it. I didn't love it. I didn't love the knives on the chest.
Right.
But then
all the silver.
Yeah, but then honestly, seeing Mark Bright draw it in the comic book, I kind of loved it.
Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. That was handled pretty well.
Yeah, and I was a big fan. I was always a big fan of the slits, the visors on Snake Eyes, and that figure went back to the goggles.
Right.
But then I loved the goggles. Like I learned to love it again. So the show starts. It's written by Flint Dille, who Flint Dille's an amazing writer. So I'm a fan of Flint. So please don't take this the wrong way if you're out there, Flint. This show starts with a bang, and there is some cool stuff about the show.
A really exciting battle. I mean, this is well done.
Totally. That shot right there we just had of panning from the Joes behind a rock shooting at Vipers behind rocks. That was a great shot. We see the flag back in action after being raised a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
And Lift Ticket and Dial Tone are gonna now. Here's where it gets a little kooky.
Here we have a third party joining the fun.
Yeah. A giant, unidentified flying object kind of goes overhead.
What it is. Yep, that's what it is.
Don't know exactly what it is yet, but it's a round thing.
Yeah. No setup for this at all.
No.
This thing is just flying over.
Yeah.
No, we don't know what it is.
I like how Beachhead wants to just shoot everything. Because, and that's a great line transition.
Yeah, that's a contrast. They're trying to show the contrast between the Joes and Cobras.
Exactly, and they did a great job with it. So Cobra launches, because Cobra fires, and from it, a golden horn, we'll say, falls out of this ship, and it lands in an area that looks like ruins from like ancient Greece. So it sounds like we're somewhere in Greece.
Right. They said they were battling over the Suez Canal.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah, so they'd have to be on the Mediterranean side of the canal.
Got it.
Which is still not that close to Greece. I mean, it's in the neighborhood, but still a few hundred miles away. But we'll ignore geography. For the purpose of story.
This is the same show that has like polar ice caps. Ice caps right next door to swamps.
That's right.
They get there in an hour on an All-Striker. So we know geography in the G.I. Joe universe is a little weird.
Yeah.
I love the use of vehicles in this is great. We got terror drones launching trouble bubbles. With hydrofoils flying, tomahawks landing.
Never seen anything like this.
And now everybody's going after the MacGuffin, the golden corn chip.
Golden corn. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it looks like a bugle.
Yeah, it does.
It does look like a bugle. I feel like the person missing from this episode is Footloose.
It looks, by the way, nothing like a Golden Fleece, the title of the episode.
Right. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. They reference that at the end. One of them, I think it's Lifeline, calls it a golden fleece.
Right.
It's not a golden fleece. It's like a horn.
Right. And we have Cobra attacking with overwhelming force, and we have the Joes in one tomahawk.
We got a tomahawk straight up knocked out of the sky.
Squad of Cobras in various vehicles and on foot.
Absolutely. Good animation. That shot of the Baroness was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
She gets tackled by Lifeline as she's about to shoot Lady J, and her laser hits that horn. So now we've got some kind of crazy light show happening.
Yep. Special effects come out of the cone.
Yeah. So going back to when you didn't like Cope. You said you were turned off by the movie that got a little too sci-fi.
Yeah, I was always a fan of the comic book, and I got to admit, I was a little bit of a snob when it came to the cartoon. I'm trying not to be such a snob as an adult viewing it, but as a kid, I was used to the comic book, which it had its silly elements, but still a bit more real world than the cartoon. I can appreciate the cartoon series though much more now.
Yeah. Did you keep reading the comic book when you stopped collecting the toys?
I did for a little while. I caught the Cobra Island Civil War, which is still one of my favorite storylines. Yeah. But probably maybe for a year or so after I stopped getting the toys, I still read the comic book.
Have you since? Do you still collect or read comics, or is that still a thing for you, or no?
I collect and read them for the purpose of the show, so that I can give the context of the figure and how it was used in the comic book.
When you're doing your vintage figure reviews, are you using the same ones you grew up with? Are they the same toys, or have you gone and purchased them, in aftermarket?
I wish I still had the ones I grew up with. I don't. So yeah, these are all figures that I've collected as an adult. All of my vintage figures, except for like a few parts that ended up in a toolbox, they are long gone. It's sad.
What do you think happened to them?
Oh, well, all right. They were in my parents' garage.
See, I knew there was a story.
I'm pretty sure they got left behind, although my mom swears, no, we brought all that stuff. Honest, we didn't throw any of it out. Well, it's nowhere. It's non-existent now. So, sorry, Mom, I'm not buying it. But yeah, all that stuff got lost in a move.
Oh, man. Well, back to the show. These guys just realized that the temple they were surrounded by used to be a ruin, and now it is in perfect condition.
Yep, and now we have...
And a couple sheep herders, some shepherds. They come walking up, and they're speaking Greek.
You speak ancient Greek?
Little bit. Had a year of it in college.
Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter understands Greek because he went to college.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
Sergeant Slaughter's got great dialogue in this episode.
Has a pointed line at Lifeline, who just shocked that a meathead like Sergeant Slaughter would know ancient Greek.
I gotta say, I'm also shocked that Sergeant Slaughter knows anything besides destruction and punching things and giving creatures suplexes. I gotta say.
I got a theory about this, though. All right.
Well,
okay.
We're gonna hear that. I want to hear the theory after the break. We're going into commercial. Today's Filecard Feature is on the G.I. Joe Renegade, codenamed Taurus. His file name is Verujan Ivazian. I'm not even going to do another take on that one. His birthplace is Istanbul. His primary specialty is demolitions, and his pay grade is he's an E5. The Renegades aren't carried on the rosters of any existing military unit. There is no computer access to their dossiers, and they are paid through a special fund earmarked for, quote, Pentagon Pest Control. This gives the Renegades a freedom of operation that the Joes can't match. It also means the government can deny everything if they're caught. Taurus was a circus acrobat in Europe who did occasional undercover work for Interpol. His circus act involved breaking 2x4s on his own face, a feat which so impressed the G.I. Joe top brass, he was recruited on the spot. Taurus has been cross-trained in explosives and mountaineering and is fluent in a dozen languages. Quote, he's an animal. He stops hockey pucks with his forehead and opens bottles with his nostrils. Lucky for us, he does everything G.I. Joe headquarters tells him. Another one of Sergeant Slaughter's Renegades, Taurus, is pretty great. He's got a really good look. He came on the 3-pack with Mercer and Red Dog. Initially, his features and just his general style of dress makes him look like he could be some kind of Cobra. He's got the shaved head, kind of a stylized goatee, mustache combination going on. His action figure, the shoulder pads that are on him in the cartoon turn into real kind of weird spikes on the action figure. So they don't really work like shoulder pads. They look more like shoulder peaks or something like that. He's primarily yellow and green. He's got a sweet gold belt buckle. That actually looks military-ish. I love that he's ex-circus. Anytime you get some kind of ex-circus, I feel like circus is the catch-all for just saying that this guy can do anything that he wants. He didn't come with a ton of accessories. Came with just a simple backpack, which actually looks a lot like, I think, Outback's backpack, if that's not the same, and a pistol, a silver gray pistol. My favorite thing about Taurus might just be that the reason the Joes decided to hire him is because he broke 2x4s with his face. Like, that's why the Joes were like, sign him up. So, Taurus, Verujan, Ivazian, that's a little better. We salute you.
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
All right, Brian, hit me up with this Sergeant Slaughter theory.
Okay, so he went to college. I think he would have studied the history of warfare. which would definitely have led him to read Thucydides, which would be a reason why he might want to study ancient Greek, to read the text in the original language. That's my theory.
That's a good point. It's a good point. He did say he only had 1 year of college, though.
That's right. That's
a lot.
Well,
Greek is ancient Greek's a lot to learn in a year of college. But maybe he didn't say he dropped out. He blazed through college in 1 year.
That's it. He's so smart. He took all of his courses 1 year, probably one semester. This is Sergeant Slaughter we're talking about.
Yeah. He should have been like, the 3 months I did an accelerated 4-year program, and then I took the GI Bill.
Right.
So the Joes are now, they're all communicating with each other via radio. Thankfully, it's radio and not like satellite, because they wouldn't be able to talk to each other.
They're in ancient Greece.
Yeah, and Lady J has the cone with her in a cave, and they're just trying to figure out, they're really getting their bearings.
Right. That's where we are at this point.
Yeah, and we're starting to get a feeling that these native Grecians kind of behave like Ewoks in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like
these modern men are gods.
Modern men are gods, yeah. So they think that Lifeline is a god of healing.
Mm-hmm. For bandaging a knee.
Yeah, right.
We're not exactly bringing like Star Trek technology here, but nonetheless,
wait a
it's
minute.
the first time they've seen gauze.
You have an open wound and you cover it with a piece of cloth? Whoa. Hold on a second. And here it comes. And here we go. Okay, Sergeant Slaughter just flexing for people, and they, of course, think he's Hercules.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I guess this kid thinks Lift Ticket is Jason from Jason and the Argonauts?
Yes, because he has a giant boat. Even though it doesn't look like a boat. And they all have boats. But okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Why not?
Listen, I will guess that these ancient Greeks did not go to 1 year of college.
I don't think
Just going to throw that out there.
Now we have, Mindbender's flying over an ancient Greek city in a modern jet. He's just landed. There's no way they're not changing history here.
Yeah. I want a really brief epilogue of this where, fast forward, I don't even know, 1,000 years or however long this is, and they find wreckage of a bat somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Terminator.
I'm imagining that opening scene from Star Trek Into Darkness where the native people draw the picture of the Enterprise. Yes. I'm just imagining some archaeologist is going to dig up some ancient carving of a night raven.
Funny you mention that. Now, this doesn't make sense. What I'm about to say doesn't make sense, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Shoot.
So these guys are calling them Hercules and calling them, this and that, and Jason the Argonauts and all that stuff. So you could say that maybe the Joes were the basis for those myths and for those stories. However, they already know those myths and stories.
Exactly. Yep.
So you can't even say that the Joes are the basis for it.
Right.
They're just the revival of it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And is this is supposedly isn't this the time when those stories were supposed to have taken place?
I think so. I think they're a little shaky on the time period, but I believe so.
Yeah. So
we're going to meet some characters that did participate in some of those myths.
Right.
So
right.
I think this is that time period.
And so then to extrapolate that, we now, if that's true, then there in this world there is a real Jason running around.
Yeah.
So at one point, Jason's going to be like, I heard that you were in this village fighting these guys with Cobra signs on their chest. And he's going to be like, what are you talking about? I was never even in that village. And you know what I mean?
Actually,
it's
just take credit for it.
Yeah, right. They're
that was me.
They're both the inspiration for it.
I'll do it again.
And just assuming the identities of here's what I'm here to say, Brian. G.I. Joe and Cobra are identity thieves.
Yeah.
They're ancient Greek identity thieves is what they are.
Both are. Both sides. But I gotta say though, Cobra is taking a much more organized approach to this situation than the Joes are. They have, they've gotten fuel. They're refueling their vehicles, recharging their weapons. Well, the Joes are just kind of floating on a raft and trying to find Lady J with our MacGuffin device.
Right. Well, yeah, it's true. Although I think they're right in assuming the MacGuffin is what's going to get them home. So that's pretty good.
We've got the novel.
I like that. Essentially, what I'm seeing is that the Cobra claws are being used as gliders now, not necessarily jet propulsion. Like there's a wind howl on the soundtrack, you know?
Right.
And they're really the missiles are even acting weird. Sergeant Slaughter just got knocked off this makeshift raft that they have.
Yeah, he got knocked off, and the Joes are like, he can't have survived that.
Yeah, well,
let's not look for him.
Maybe his deep knowledge of ancient Greek will do him well as he lives in this timeline forever.
Maybe so. Maybe so. That year of college is going to save his life.
Yeah, right?
That's no use. Nobody can survive.
Lipstick is just like, screw him. Forget him. Forget him. We're going to commercial break with Sergeant Slaughter being lost to the sands of time. Hey there, Joe on Joe listeners. Unfortunately, as you know, North America has really been getting it handed to us in the Gulf region. Between hurricanes Harvey, Irma, then Maria, then there was an earthquake in Mexico. It's been a really rough month. There's a whole lot of people in Houston, Florida, Mexico, and Puerto Rico that can use a helping hand. So I'm urging you, if you have the means, think about donating what you can to the Red Cross. 91 cents of every dollar donated to the Red Cross goes to humanitarian services. They provide all those things you don't realize that you need every day, like water, food, shelter, the little things. So go to redcross.org and click on the donate button to see how you can be a real American hero.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
So he's going to fight off this entire army with a stick.
Well, he Sergeant Slaughter. Him using a stick is a disadvantage. They're lucky he just doesn't use his musculature,
The army is at a disadvantage here.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. So, Brian, have you ever had probably in your specific line of work, like a line of legal defense, probably not, but have you ever had like a plaintiff or a defendant like go, hey, aren't you hooded Cobra Commander?
Not yet. Although I have had some local people recognize me, which is kind of cool. But no, fortunately not. That could be a little awkward. Considering the situations that I experience in work, that could be quite awkward.
Yeah, that's one thing. No, and how did you come up? Like, how did you settle on or decide on the name Hooded Cobra Commander? Is he your favorite?
No, he's not. I was just looking for a unique name at the time, honestly, and it kind of stuck. The 788 is a reference to the number on the his tank, and I did like the Hooded Cobra Commander, and it was a name nobody was using at the time. But I usually tend to favor the Joes. I like the good guys.
Well, you are wearing a Cobra shirt right now.
That is true. Well, this is.
It's strange.
Undercover at the moment.
You know what's strange? They when they did the live action movie, they tried to really brand that eagle symbol for the G.I. Joe team, and I don't think it really stuck that well. It's weird.
Hard to,
G.I. Joe doesn't have a logo. They have they have the name logo, which I guess is a logo, but it's not a logo.
It's not as iconic as that Cobra head symbol. It's hard to beat that. That is a really nicely designed logo. Yeah,
but you think about the Transformers, the Decepticons and the Autobots both had very unique looking logos. And Cobra had theirs, and G.I. Joe didn't have one. Yes, the words G.I. Joe, but that was, it's like walking around with like the title card of your cartoon on your toy. It's not the same.
Yeah. Well, maybe they were trying to make them a bit more individualistic, which is ironic since they are a military group.
Yeah.
By the way, it takes Sergeant Slaughter precisely 4 whacks with a pickaxe to level a mountain.
Well, okay. Once again, you're dealing with Sergeant Slaughter. Like it probably would have taken a machine like 18 and probably anybody. This is great. Yeah, Sarge is just digging into this mountain. And it has come crushing down. Basically, in playing the role of Hercules, Sergeant Slaughter gets assigned the task of cleaning out the stables. Here's what I don't get, because I took my Greek myth classes and stuff, Didn't essentially Hercules do the same thing?
He did. That was the fifth. The fifth task
Right.
or the fifth labor of Hercules?
So why is this king saying that he's not Hercules? Hercules literally changed the course of Mighty River, and that's how he did it, right?
Yeah, right.
So
I think Hercules did not wear a hat. I think
Well,
that's the giveaway.
I mean, that's true, but I'm confused by this. It's like because he did exactly what
What's
Hercules
more
did. He changed the course of the river and it cleaned the stables.
King Aegeus, I think that's his name, is speaking English.
Well, or are we just all inside Sergeant Slaughter's head?
That's where I want to be. I want to be inside.
Oh
Sergeant
my God,
Slaughter's
that's where we all need to be. So Brian, every episode of the show, we ask our guests if you could be a member of the Joe team or the Cobra team, who would you be? What would your specialty be? What would your code name be? Things like that. So tell me, have you given any thought to this?
I have. Here's what I think. Even though I do tend to favor the Joes, I do have a Cobra screen name, so I'll go on the Cobra side this time.
Nice.
And I want my code name to be Race Judicata.
Spell that? What is that?
Race, R-E-S, Judicata. Spelled like it sounds. A little Latin for you.
I was just going to spell like it sounds.
Yeah.
Sounds like gibberish.
Judicata. You can call me Judy for short.
Okay.
It's a legal term that basically refers to a case that has had its resolution and is done. It can't be further litigated. It's completed. It's a finished case.
Okay.
Race judicata.
Awesome. And what would you be, like the Cobra lawyer or something?
Yeah. What I want to be is the Cobra lawyer that got Cobra Island recognized by the UN as a nation.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that was some miracle work. Because in real life, there's no chance of that ever happening.
That was one of my favorite moments in that comic book.
Yeah. That was a game changer. I mean, Cobra is not just some rogue organization anymore. They are a nation.
Right? That's awesome. Race Judicata. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are pronouncing that correct.
Race Judicata. He's the Cobra lawyer. Now, would you have would you be concealing your identity, or are you just like in like a Cobra themed business suit?
Yeah, it's got to be the Cobra themed business suit because you got to dress appropriately for court. So,
what weapon will you pack? What weapon are you packing? Because you can't get it. You can't bring it past metal detectors in the courthouse, of course.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm thinking I'll have a plastic shiv.
Yeah.
Tucked into my shoe. Or
because you're
like
always
that.
spending time at the prison talking to your clients and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like a prison shiv.
If push comes to shove and we have to use violent means, hey, we're Cobra.
I love
do what
it.
we got to do.
Brian, I love it. Well, while we were chatting and meeting Race Judicata, the Joes found a way to reverse the effects of the time travel with the MacGuffin. They definitely served as the inspiration for those myths, even though those myths existed in these people's heads. So I don't.
Sure.
My brain's still trying to wrap around that conundrum. It's worse than like any of the Back to the Future conundrums. And now we're back in the deck of the flag. And here comes giant spaceships. And a ray of light comes out. And the little golden horn.
The Golden Fleece.
See? He just calls it a Golden Fleece.
Right. Even though it doesn't look anything like that. And there are space aliens in G.I. Joe. They just were strolling by. They don't have anything to do with the story other than dropping this thing and then picking it up and leaving. What this reminds me of is the scene from Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Okay.
When Brian is falling out of the minaret and there just happens to be like a UFO flying by right there to catch him.
Okay.
That's like what this is. It's like, okay, here's some UFOs that just happen to be flying over for no reason that we can discern.
Yeah.
Look in any history book.
I mean, there is a little bit of synchronicity involved here. So with the aliens coming down and that happening to them, that is exactly like what happened to the ancient Greeks. The Joes came down, and the theory of any future technology would be indiscernible from magic.
Right.
So we're essentially seeing it. So and that's one of the things what I said earlier, where it's well written. It's a strong character story and well-written story from that regard. So it's got a lot of nice bookend or poetry to the episode.
Sure.
So what's happening to the Joes is what's happened to the Greeks and so on and so forth. having said that, I could do with a little less time travel in my G.I. Joe.
Yeah. I think one of the redeeming qualities in this episode is it has a little bit of a history lesson to it. I mean, they do refer to actual, Greek mythology and history and real characters at the time, and I can appreciate that. It was kind of weird getting there and getting back, but I appreciate the kind of little mini history lesson.
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do like it. I do like that part of it. I agree. That part is not a bad thing. A little explanation on the aliens, but you know what? Let's now throw this out there. We now legitimately have aliens in the G.I. Joe universe.
Yeah.
Like it's
maybe this is where Lobotomax came from.
Yeah,
in like the 1994 series.
There you go. Like it's canon. So, and I know obviously we know Transformers show up. So maybe that was a Transformer ship. Maybe that was the Quintessons or something like that.
Let's just make that the explanation. That's now the explanation there.
I think that's what we're gonna go with.
I'll be expecting my no prize.
I will send you an envelope with nothing in it. All right.
Thank you.
This was great, Brian. Thanks for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks for listening. So remember, check out Brian on YouTube at Hooded Cobra Commander 788. You're on Twitter at HCC 788.
Yep, that's the shortened version of the long time.
Yeah, because that's a long Twitter handle. You can always check me out at Joe and Joe Pod. It's on all over on Instagram, and send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Brian Lauer, thank you so much. Hooded Cobra Commander 788, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
It was a whole lot of fun. Well, now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.